No, no.
Alex Metz is here. Go ahead, Alex.
One of the real common sociological things you'll find out about in reference to Hueco Tanks and El Paso, there is a long connection between the U.S. military and Hueco Tanks. Everything back to Spanish military excursions. The oldest written record of Hueco Tanks and written Spanish documents is in the company of either or both Apache Scouts and Kiowa Scouts. 1692, and they're trying to reconquest of New Mexico. The Spanish document traveling and stopping at Hueco Tanks, and it was important as a water stopping place on their way to the Guadalupes. Then they mention it again in 1773. They do not enter Hueco Tanks because they report a very large Apache encampment. In the 1800s, and especially the 1860s, 70s, and 80s, Hueco Tanks became increasingly important as a weapons cache, a place to stop and rest and clean your wounds and heal up from battle for the Apaches, who were being both persecuted and chased by both Mexican military and American military. And the most famous one is Victorio. If you want to read Eve Ball's In the Days of Victorio,
he was there.
They explicitly mention Hueco Tanks. And Victorio's group, both before entering Mexico, was being massacred at Tres Castillos, and the survivors on the return back passed by Hueco Tanks and depend on it. They actually used Hueco Tanks strategically to outmaneuver troops from Fort Bliss. Now in the 1940s and 30s, the Fort Bliss, they still had a mounted horse cavalry, and even after they mechanized, they would go on and do maneuvers and training out in the area of Hueco Tanks and Hot Wells and that area, what later went on to become the Navarre Ranch and others. And in interviews with the older members of the Navarre family, they had about a 40-year legal litigation with the U.S. government and the military because they were first asked if they could camp next to a water hole there, what they called the 16 or 18 camps, Tank 16 or Camp 18, I want to say it was Camp 6, Tank 16.
But the question of Fort Bliss owning or not?
They never owned it, but they would maneuver a lot out there, and to the point where they began to feel like they did own it, and that was where they entered into conflict with the Navarres and wound up in a 40-year litigation.
So yes and no, the Army did not own it then, but they seem to have used it. Thanks, Joseph. Sure. For KTSM is us, Mr. Metz. You got a question there from Mr. Tsonetokoy. Dewey Tsonetokoy is here from the Kiowa Tribe.
What do you think is currently the biggest threat to the spiritual, cultural, and historical integrity of Hueco Tanks?
All right, who's doing that one?
Read that question again.
All right. What, in your opinion, is currently the biggest threat to the spiritual, cultural, and historical integrity of Hueco Tanks? In other words, are too many people, not enough money, nobody cares, it's being run down or mistreated, what?
Let me go back to something that was said in the first hour, and that had to do with, I think, what the individual person, I think, thinks of Hueco Tanks, and maybe what that person might want to do. And I think the term was used about, you know, the right thing to do about Hueco Tanks. And I've always thought, you know, I've always depended on people having the intelligence to do the right thing. So that's kind of what we want to do here, is to educate the public about the significance of Hueco Tanks in all those areas, the historical aspect, the cultural aspects, and the spiritual aspects of Hueco Tanks, and what they mean to the native people. So what I'm, again, so the same thing here is what I want to do is, after we educated the public regarding Hueco Tanks, then it's up to the public to have the intelligence, you know, to do the right thing regarding Hueco Tanks.
A question's always crossed my mind, and I've always wanted to ask it. Hueco Tanks, to me, that doesn't mean anything, and it sounds like a tank, and yet these are big, huge boulders, rocks out there that hundreds of people can climb on at one time. And where did the Hueco Tanks come from? The name.
I do think we got that, didn't we?
You know, you got these prejudices in your mind, you know, regarding the tanks and everything, and that comes from your childhood. Let me tell you something about my childhood, something that happened to me. You know, when we were kids, we're just impressed by things that happen in our lives, and this little lady that called earlier, she talked about something that happened in her life regarding Hueco Tanks, and it had an impression on her life. You know, the issues regarding Hueco Tanks are religious, but they're also they're sociological, you know, and even, you know, a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but there are racial issues here too. But the sociological issue regarding Native people, and I'm sure that these gentlemen here know what I'm talking about. If you're a Native American, you experience this. And when I was a kid, I was maybe 5, 6 years old, and I had this uncle and aunt who would come and pick me up. My uncle was a Methodist minister, and so he would go to these churches and you know, his churches, his congregations, and I remember we were going somewhere, and see, Carlos, we have our own church songs, and that were composed back in the turn of the 20th century. And he was singing this church song, but also at that age I had been to some powwows, and I heard you know, the men at the drum singing you know, traditional songs. But my uncle, he was while driving, he was singing this song, and I was in the back seat of the car at the time. I don't know what I was doing, but I heard him singing that song, and I jumped up and I kind of slapped him in the shoulder, and I told him, "Hey, that's an Indian song, you know." And you know, and then so I was playing around again in the back seat, doing whatever, and he started singing. Later on, he started singing that song again, and I remember jumping up and slapping him on the shoulder again. And I said, "Hey, that's an Indian song." And see, at that age, I already knew it wasn't cool to be an Indian. Now, this society did that hip trip on me. You know, they made me think that I was a second-class citizen just because I was an Indian. Just because I heard this song, you know, that my uncle had sung. And, you know, if you're a Christian, you know, that's really something that they focus on, you know. You got to give up your pagan ways, you know, and all this, you know. Sociologically, that has a really impact on Native people, you know, and their impression of themselves, you know, their self-esteem. See, we got a self-esteem problem going here, you know, and it's difficult to try and get past that, you know, to say, well, I'm okay.
Can you explain it a little bit deeper?
So this, places like Hueco Tanks contain, today, they contain the essence of who we are as a people. We can go to places like Hueco Tanks, and that definition of who we are as Native people is still there. And the reason it's because it's still there is because there are prayers that were said at these images, these sacred images that are there. And you know, they were said by Indian people long ago, the ancient ones. I'm a Christian. I feel like I'm a Christian. I feel that prayer never dies. Prayer lives on. So prayer is imbued in these images at Hueco Tanks and at other places. I've been to a place called Weatherman Draw in Montana. Same thing. The images there, you know, prayer. Weatherman Draw is sacred too, you know, to Native people. So when you go to these places, there's this term that you might hear, walking in a sacred manner. That's why you have to do that. You have to walk in a sacred manner, because what you're doing is you're walking on the prayers of the ancients. And those prayers never died, they're still there. So that's kind of my take on what the situation is, so at least sociologically. And we just touched on the spiritual aspect of these places. But sociologically, you know, we Native people, we need these places. And I'm trying to tell the public, or Alex has been trying to, and these men here, you know, they want the public to know too, that these places are important to us. You have to do the right thing. You have to help us preserve these places, because you know, we can't do anything. My politics is powerless. You know, I'm only one vote, and I'm only one Kiowa out of 12,000 Kiowa. Our membership is over a little over 12,000. So I can't do anything politically. You know, I cannot do anything. The people out there have to kind of more or less come to our rescue and help us preserve these sites.
And one thing you're looking to do at Hueco Tanks is to get everyone else to understand that and maybe join with you.